Hello, are you troubled by strange noises in the middle of the night? Do you experience feelings of dread in your bar or chocobo stable? Have you or any member of your family seen a ghost, specter, or other hooded gas-filled astral projection that attempts to stand in your way as you try and alter the course of destiny? If the answer is yes, then don't wait another minute. Pick up the phone and call the professionals. Avalanche. Our courteous and efficient staff is on call 24 hours a day to completely destroy the timeline and stick it to a corrupt tyrannical corporation at the same time. Leave it to our elite squad comprised of a psychologically damaged murder machine with a truckload of mommy issues, a skilled fighter who has massive moral quandaries about actually fighting, a man with so many anger issues he really shouldn't have a gun attached to his arm, a quirky local florist and her talking fire starter Pokemon, a woman so thirsty it's amazing she can still function, the comedic relief who's always talking about food, and Biggs! He's also here. They'll fight off the forces of the paranormal and protect the environment at the same time. Remember, that's Avalanche. We're ready to believe you. And if you're not believable, then we'll rewrite reality until you are. Avalanche. Kids, when you've been in quarantine for 2 months and all you have to entertain yourself is video games and old 80s movies, sometimes the two of them get mashed together in your mind and you think it would be a good idea to combine them together for an opening skit for your review show, and you don't realize how stupid it all sounds until you've already done it. But on the bright side, at least I got this cool lab coat out of the whole thing. So I got that going on. Here's our Final Fantasy VII Remake review. I'm going to start this review off with a confession. I never actually finished the original Final Fantasy VII. I bought it decades ago, took it back home, played it for about a week, and then my PlayStation crapped out on me and I couldn't continue. And eventually I got PlayStation 2 so I could go back and finish it if I wanted to, but then I lost my memory card, so if I did want to play it, that means I would have to replay the first 15 hours of the game all over again. And yeah, it was kind of hard to find the motivation to do that. But over the years, the game kept getting re-released again and again on the PC and the PlayStation Network and then on the Switch, and eventually I said, that's it, I'm finally going to do it. I'm finally going to return to this game and I'm going to beat it. And then they announced the Final Fantasy VII Remake and I said, oh, never mind that stuff, I'm just going to play this when it comes out. I bring this up because I feel that it's important for everyone to know where someone is coming from when they review this game, because there are two types of people playing this. People who played the original Final Fantasy VII, and people who are going into this fresh, having never touched it before. And I believe how much enjoyment you get out of this game, the impact it's going to give you, is largely going to depend on which of these categories you fall into. And I'm somewhere in between. You see, this game, well, it's sort of a remake of Final Fantasy VII, but if you played the original, it becomes clear pretty early on something is new here. Something isn't quite right. It starts small and continues to grow, and if you love the original, these changes will be massive for you. And if you didn't play the original, you're probably just going to be very confused by the time all this is done. Let's start by taking a look at the story. A corrupt company called Shinra is destroying the planet by sucking up all of the Mako. Mako. Right. That's going to take some getting used to. They're sucking up all of the Mako, the lifeblood of the planet itself. So a gang of eco-terrorists named Avalanche lead an attack on the reactor, bringing along a mercenary called Cloud who used to be a soldier for the Shinra organization. After a bombing that went a little bit better than they expected, Cloud runs into his old childhood friend Teva, who is helping Avalanche even though she doesn't quite feel comfortable with their methods, and a flower girl named Aerith who really feels like she knows a bit more about everything than she's letting on.
I've been dying to see you.
Spoilers? From there, Cloud becomes invested in this battle, while still being haunted by his past, so if you play the original game, you'll be pretty well acquainted with all this. Right up until you aren't. You see, early on, this game starts to take a bit of a turn. Strange ghostly figures begin to appear, and while their purpose isn't very clear at first, as the game goes along, you start to realize not only were they not in the original game, but they're now appearing at some pretty pinnacle moments in the storyline, and I'm going to leave it at that. Part of me doesn't want to go into any more details about it because where this story goes is actually really bold and I was genuinely impressed by it, and I don't want to take that surprise away from anyone. But real talk, if you're a big enough Final Fantasy fan to feel the impact of these moments, you've probably already played this game, and if you're not a Final Fantasy fan, these moments won't mean anything to you. But speaking personally, I love this thread. I couldn't wait to pull on and see where it went. Even with the limited experience that I had with the original game, I was still jumping up at Twist because it raised so many questions about where this story could potentially go. I do have to stress that part about where it could go, because this game only covers the first third of the original Final Fantasy VII. And I know a lot of people might be wondering how they could take such a limited part of the original game and expand it to be a full-length experience. Well, I think the best way that I could possibly sum it up for you would be... Okay, I know that looks bad, and not just because it was a clip from a Fantastic Four movie, but because whenever you think of stretching a storyline out, it tends to have negative connotations. But I assure you, they actually stretch the story out well. Mostly. It does have some problems here and there that we will get into, but for now, yeah, it was actually really impressive how they were able to expand on everything. They took some of the supporting characters from the original and fleshed them out far more, and this was great. There's a whole mission exploring the relationships of Biggs and Wedge and Jesse, and it makes them such deeper characters. I didn't care about Wedge in the original, but they gave him some really touching moments. And just look around the internet and you'll see the world has fallen in love with Jesse. Although, I will say, I don't know if I quite feel the same way that the rest of the internet does about Jessie. She came on a bit too strong for me.
Okay, I get it. Mind letting me breathe?
Depends. Mind coming over tomorrow night? My roommates should all be out for a while.
Are you seriously that desperate?
In fact, while I'm on that, everyone comes on too strong in here. Why does every woman in this game want to jump on Cloud the moment they see him? I've played dating sims where characters hit on the protagonist less than this. Is it the hair? It's probably the hair. And while the supporting characters profited the most from this expansion, even the main party members received a boost. For people out there who don't play a lot of RPGs, especially JRPGs, which tend to be way more wordy and dialogue heavy, you might be wondering why someone would want to put 30, 40, 50, 100 hours into these games. And there are many reasons for it. Gameplay, graphics, combat, many different elements factor into it. But for me, the most important thing has always been characters. You have to make me actually care about these people in this game to make me want to keep spending time with them after having already invested a dozen hours into it. And this game nails that. I won't lie. I remember Cloud being a mopey, cold loner, and sure enough, he starts out that way. But once that iceberg of emotions start to crack and he finally warms up to everyone else, you are invested in where he's going to go and how he'll grow as a character. Aerith is far quirkier than I remember her being in the first game, but it worked. By the end of the game, I was totally on board with her being almost this heartfelt comedic relief. Teva is... listen, there's no other word for it. Teva is adorable. She's caring, she's supportive, she's kind, she's everyone's childhood best friend. And yet, she can bench press a tank. It's a wonderful combination that works incredibly well. And Barrett, I'll be honest with you, Barrett to me in the original was an over-exaggerated joke. Again, I know I didn't get far enough to see everyone's emotional payoff when I played it all those years ago, but I was not feeling Barrett on that first run. But now, Barrett's my favorite character. Straight up, I love this guy. Yes, he's still over the top, hilariously so at times. I mean, just to give you guys a peek behind the curtain here, I take notes when I play these games so I know what clips to use in the reviews, and I literally have Barrett says weird thing in my notes about 10 times.
Where could they be going? Embarking on an adventure to find some treasure?
But now that we actually have time to delve deeper into his character, now that we actually get to hear his voice and see the little moments between him and everyone else, he feels so much more real. When he goes on his big bombastic speeches, he now feels like a real person who actually has weight behind his words. Yes, he's still over the top gruff and macho, but you get a sense of him caring for everyone in his team. And the way he talks to his daughter Marlene and the connection that the two of them have is just to die for. Heck, there are even minor characters in this game who I flat out hated when they first popped up, But by the end of the game, I had to stop and admit to myself, darn it, I'm going to miss that overly exaggerated, goofy cartoon character. It's honestly shocking to me how much this game made me love these characters. So for anyone who was worried this game wasn't going to treat them right, don't worry. Again, I know I'm not an expert on this, but I've looked around the internet to gauge everyone's reactions, and it looks like everyone agrees this is one of the best interpretations of these characters they've ever seen. It really looks like fans of the franchise will be very pleased. And speaking of fans of the franchise, I really need to hammer home, this is a game for Final Fantasy fans. As I said, they stretched out this story, so they had to fill it with something, and they dug deep into Final Fantasy VII lore to pack it in. There are characters in here who have full plot lines who all came from a Final Fantasy VII spin-off novel. There are references to Advent Children, Crisis Core. There's even a whole section that's a reference to Dirge of Cerberus, a game I literally had to look up the title for because I tried so hard to forget it. It is crazy to me how much they fit into what is, in all honesty, a small portion of the overall characters and only a handful of locations. Which brings me to some of my problems with the stretching. While I'm really impressed with what they did, there are some moments where it felt like they could have done more. Like I said, Biggs and Wedge and Jesse all get some time to shine, but I couldn't help but wonder why even when I'm going on brand new missions with them made specifically for this game, they still never officially join my party. As I said, I did get more of a connection with them in this game than the original, but simply giving me a few missions with them in my party would have added so much more of that. And there's a lot of lore to Final Fantasy VII, and they do take some time to flesh some of that out, but there's a lot of things that they could have fleshed out that I honestly wondered why they didn't take any time to delve into it. For example, they mentioned multiple times about a war with a neighboring nation, Wutai, but that's all it is, just mentions. How about a quest delving into that, or a character from that other nation in here to help give us some more context? Also, the pacing of the game is a bit rough at times. I started this game off loving it, then at the end of the game, still loving it. But there was about 8 hours in the middle where we're just walking through a town and all I could think was, I really want to get back to the main story. That stuff was way more interesting than this. Could we not be here now? But you have to be there now, because this game is very much on rails, which goes against what I know a lot of people picture when they think of Final Fantasy. They think of a big open world to explore, but this game only covers the part of Final Fantasy VII right up until you get to go to that big open world. So I understand why you couldn't explore that much, and I'll be honest with you, I don't have a problem with the lack of an open world because these towns are amazing on their own. They feel like everything was thought out down to the tiniest cracks in the walls, and everywhere you look, there are uniquely designed people walking around and having conversations. So many so that it can actually be overwhelming at times. Whenever a random NPC has a conversation with another character, it fills up on the left side of the screen, and the moment you enter a busy town, the left side of your screen is just gone. It is nothing but a wall of text until you leave that area. And I know the term overwhelming can make it sound like this is a negative. It's not. I'm stunned at how much dialogue they wrote and how many lines were recorded for this game in order to make everything feel alive. So I don't have a problem with the fact that there isn't an open world in this game. But here's the thing. The game still tried to capture that feeling of an open world by giving you lots of side quests. And honestly, I thought these side quests were really good. Some of my favorite moments in the entire game came from these side quests, so no complaints about the quests themselves. The quests are a big positive. But when it comes to the pacing, it is something of a problem for me. Because these side quests aren't sprinkled throughout the game naturally, they more have stopped the whole game to say, hey guys, time for side quests. That's not an exaggeration, by the way. There are about 3 times throughout this game where they just go, well, we're here in this town, might as well find people to do chores for. And it always felt to me like the game was turning to me and reminding me, hey, you're playing a video game. Go do video game things. Again, exploring the towns, great. The quests themselves, loved them. The way that they paced these quests throughout the game, yeah, it needed some work. But speaking of exploring the towns, let's take a moment to talk about how this game looks. think that about does it. No, seriously, what can I possibly say about these graphics that will sum up how gorgeous they are better than just looking at them? Are you listening to this video in a different tab while you're working on something else right now? Don't lie, I do it too, no judgment here, but take a moment. Stop what you're doing and just look at how gorgeous these landscapes are, how detailed these city streets are. Heck, just think about the fact that they actually found a way to make this hairstyle actually look good on a photorealistic model. Final Fantasy games were always known for pushing the limits of graphical qualities, and it's amazing to me that even this late into this generation of consoles, they're still doing it. And there's so much happening in these scenes too. I remember at one point I was walking through a crumbling city, and a giant pillar just fell in the background. Not because it was a set piece, it just happened. And if I didn't happen to have my camera in that direction at that particular moment, I would never even have noticed it. But they just put it in there to make this place feel alive, to make everything feel like it was moving, and it's just incredible the lengths that they went to. I mean, if I have to find any problem in it, and it's me, so of course I do, some of the new character designs are a bit off. I mean, this is a game where our protagonist has a shoulder pad with a bunch of screws sticking out of it. Nothing in here is going to look natural, but at least everything looks like it fits together. But Tetsuya Nomura's sense of fashion has changed a lot in the past 2 decades, so whenever a new character popped up, I looked at them like, you do not belong in this game. You're out of Final Fantasy 15, and you're out of Kingdom Hearts. Also, while I'm talking about the presentation, one small problem I had with the audio, this game sounds great 90% of the time, but whenever I was walking through town, the sound of random citizens would be so loud at times, it would actually drown out my party members who were trying to give me vital bits of information I needed to listen to.
So, you make nice with everyone?
Much as I could, all things considered. Maybe not enough for them.
Good.
But those are nitpicks at best, and when that's the worst thing that I can say about the presentation, you know it's good. However, when talking about the presentation, arguably my favorite aspect of it had to be the music. They took the original Final Fantasy VII soundtrack and remixed it all. There's tons of new versions of all the classic tracks, and I can't name one that I didn't like. Whenever I went into battle and I activated a limit break and the camera started dramatically zooming in and the music would kick in at just the right moment, it was stunning. Like watching an insane action movie that I was controlling. Yes, I know I sound like a 1,000-year-old man describing what it felt like to watch that footage of the train coming at the movie screen, but I don't care. These moments in the battles got me hyped. Although, maybe we should now take this moment to talk about the combat because there is a lot to love about it. But it's not quite complete. There is a problem with it that made it frustrating at times. What? A modern day Final Fantasy combat system that's got good ideas but flawed execution? I'm shocked. I've never heard of such a thing. This is my shocked face, everyone. I'll alert the media. And so on. They kind of have a pattern at this point. The best way I can describe the combat system in the Final Fantasy VII Remake is it's like they took the turn-based system of classic RPGs and tried to turn it into a Devil May Cry Bayonetta-style character action game. All characters can do a string of basic combos, but they also have a special alternate attack button, and when you combine the two of them together, you can create a lot of variety. And as you attack, you fill up an ATB gauge, and that will allow you to use abilities and spells that you can learn by equipping materia to your armor and weapons. And the great thing about the weapons in this game is that rather than having to constantly buy new weapons with better stats, you can upgrade each weapon so each of them get better as you play through the game, but every single weapon that you get for these characters will focus on different strengths, so you can now fully customize how each character fights. So far, everything I've said, love it. This actually all plays out great. The combat is smooth and you can customize it in so many ways. I've seen people doing kicks and flips with Teva that lead into wall bounces and air juggles in ways that make me really wonder why she's never been in a fighting game. I mean, one we'd actually want to play. And you can switch between each member of your party, or you can just issue commands to them while still controlling your main fighter. And while it took some getting used to, once I figured it out, I love this too. It reminded me of the mental games you have to play with yourself in a classic turn-based RPG, but now incorporated into a fast-paced, action-heavy setting. Now, I will admit, it did kind of annoy me that if I switched to a character at the end of a battle, then at the start of the next battle, it would automatically switch me back to Cloud. Yeah, that got a little bit annoying, but that's all. It was just a pet peeve, not a real problem. Here's the real problem. You need to attack to fill up your ATB gauge, which can hold a max of 2 charges. These charges are used up whenever you use a spell, an ability, or an item. And if you use a spell, then you'll also use up your MP points, which do regenerate, but very slowly. Still sounds alright, but here's where it starts to fall apart. Whatever character you're controlling will instantly be targeted by most, if not all, of the enemies. Even if you change over to another character while you're attacking them with that first character, the enemies will instantly start dogpiling on you. And because you're getting attacked, you're inevitably going to need to use some of your charges from your ATB gauge to heal yourself. But you're also going to want to use some of those charges to hit the enemy with magic, because the main way to do damage to monsters, especially bosses, is by filling up their stagger meter until they're stunned. Meaning they'll take serious damage for a limited amount of time, and hitting an enemy with magic will increase their stagger gauge significantly more than regular attacks. So you need ATB charges to stagger your enemy. But because the enemies always target whoever you're controlling, you'll need to use ATB charges to heal yourself. But you can only hold 2 ATB charges at a time. Sounds kinda tricky, but shouldn't be a problem, because remember, your other party members are also filling up their gauges by attacking as well. However, as I played through this, something didn't feel right. As I said, the combat felt like it should be this perfectly precise system, but I never had what I needed. I constantly found myself drained of resources and I didn't know why. It didn't make sense. But about halfway through the game, which honestly is way longer than it should have taken me, I realized what the problem is. When you control a character, you run in and attack with them to fill up your ATB gauge, while the computer controls all the other characters. And the computer is terrible. I spent the first half of this game wondering, why don't any of my teammates ever have charges? I need them to heal me or attack the enemy with a spell. Why don't they ever have any power? Before I actually started watching them in battle, and I realized they can't do anything without you holding their hand. Teva, the enemy isn't targeting you. You don't need to block. You could totally attack them right now. Aerith, you're the only one here with range attacks. It would be great if you attacked that flying enemy instead of whatever it is that you're doing over there. Okay, well, now you guys are attacking, but you're attacking a wall, so I guess the thought is there. So basically, I'd control character A, use up my 2 charges, swap over to character B so they could heal character A, only to find that they hadn't been attacking this whole time, so now I have nothing I can use. And because of this, situations can go from bad to worse in the blink of an eye. I'm playing character A. They die. Swap over to character B so they can revive them. But they can't do anything until they fill up their charges by attacking the enemy. The enemy that is now instantly targeting character B. Character B now takes damage, so instead of using my charge to revive my ally, I have to use that charge to heal myself. I take more damage. Character B now has to heal themselves again, except that they can't heal themselves because their MP is too low, so instead they have to use that charge to use an ether on themselves to refill their MP. So now character B has to attack again to fill up their gauge again, so that way they can heal themselves, and now character B is dead, so now it's up to character C to revive both of them, but character C has no ATB charges because the computer wasn't attacking with them. As I said, when I got used to constantly shifting between characters, this did become easier to manage, but it still feels like this isn't balanced. It feels like there are so many small things that could be done to fix this. Rather than only being able to give my teammates specific commands like use fire on this enemy, use this item to heal yourself, let me give them general commands like Barrett, focus on attacking, Aerith, focus on healing, Teva, focus on both but prioritize attacking. Tons of other RPGs have systems like this, and it would have made this combat so much easier to deal with. Or give us 3 charges rather than 2, so I wouldn't have to constantly use my 1 backup charge just to heal myself.
Or don't have items count towards your ATB gauge and let us use them freely. That made no sense to me. I have to build up my power so I can use a special move or a spell. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Why do I have to build up my power so I can reach into my pocket and pull out some medicine?
And I want to make it clear, I'm not complaining that this combat system is too hard. It's not hard at all. But it is frustrating. Little story, you guys are going to have to indulge me here for a second, but when I got my first car, it was this old Ford Taurus, and when I got it, the transmission was completely shot. So I could drive it, it went anywhere that I needed it to go, but if I brought the car to a stop, it would refuse to go again. Then all of a sudden, it would jump ahead by 3 feet all at once, and I would bounce around inside the car like a pinball. And this constant pattern of, okay, we're going, now we've come to a stop, now we can't go anymore, okay, now we're throwing directly headfirst into the fray, I have whiplash, okay, we're going again. It drove me insane, and that's exactly what this combat system is like. When it goes, it's great. When it's working, it's wonderful. But it doesn't work all the time, and there's so many little tiny things that they could have done to this system to make sure that it did work all the time. This is not one of those, they need to change this from the ground up kind of thing. No. This is something that could easily be fixed with a small patch. But unless a patch like that is in the works, this combat system is going to hold on to that Square Enix label of, good in theory, flawed in execution.
But even with these problems, the combat and the rest of the gameplay is still very fun for the most part. And yes, the story has some pacing problems, but it still makes you just love this world and these characters. And every little twist that they add to it made me not just want to play the rest of the games coming out, it convinced me to finally go back and play the ones that I missed out on. There is still so much good in this game. That is until you get to the end. Now, as I said, I've looked around the internet to gauge everyone's reaction, and while there are some people who enjoy how this game wraps up, I saw most people, including some die-hard Final Fantasy fans and people who were loving the rest of this game, stop and ask, okay, what the hell was that? Now, I'm going to try and be as spoiler-free as possible here. We do have a spoiler talk about the game. A card for it should be popping up right now. If you want more details on my thoughts on this subject, go and check that out. But the best way that I can describe my problems with how this game ends is that Tetsuya Nomura the whole thing up. As I mentioned, I had pacing problems all throughout the game, but rarely was it ever a big problem. But at the end of this game, despite the few changes they've made and the extra content they have added on, they're still following the first game. Then they just stop the whole thing dead in its tracks to say, okay, final boss time. This game is 18 chapters long, and it really needed to be 20, because this game literally shoves a final boss fight right into the middle of a completely unrelated scene. And yes, it is as jarring as that sounds. And one problem I've had with the story all throughout that I haven't brought up yet is that there are a lot of questions that the audience is going to have, and that's great. It's good for a game to make you ask questions. But there's also a lot of questions that the character should have, and nobody asks anything. And at the end of this game, they are thrown into a big final confrontation out of nowhere, and everyone in that scene should be asking, okay, what is this? Some of you know something and you're not telling. Time to talk about this. But no, they don't, and it kind of drove me crazy. As I said, we needed about 2 more chapters to get us to that final battle, but instead, it really feels like someone came in and said, yeah, no time. That big final boss fight we were playing, just drop it anywhere, it's fine. And I have to be honest with you, because of how this ended, it made me a little concerned for the future of this series. But then I had to stop and remind myself of how good these characters were, how bold the directions were it was heading in, how intriguing all of this was, and it got me excited again. So I'm still going to give this game an 8.5 out of 10, but I do have to stress, this is coming from someone who is familiar with Final Fantasy VII, has some experience playing it, but not a full understanding of it, and wouldn't describe myself as a die-hard fan. And I do believe that's important to repeat, because if you are a big fan of this game, I could see this being your game of the year. But on the other hand, if you know absolutely nothing about this franchise, then you might just want to go back and play the original first and come back later. But that's just my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments down below. And again, if you have played through this and you want some more thoughts and some crazy theories on top of all that about what the heck any of this could possibly mean, then check out our spoiler talk. And you can always follow us on the internet at Thorgi's Arcade on Twitter or Professor Thorgi on Twitch. Thanks again for tuning in, everyone. Come back next time.